Hey Alupa!
Welcome to another video.
Today we are wrapping up what we read in the month of March.
April.
Oh yeah, April. We are wrapping up what we read in April.
Yes. Wow, I can't believe it's already gone by. But it was a very productive month, I think, for both of us.
Yes.
The first book I read was I'm Noted Nigger by Dean Atta. And some of you may remember that we read The Black Mingo before. And this is a book that I already owned by Dean Atta. I think I gave it 3 stars. It's an earlier work, and I think it wasn't quite as polished as The Black Flamingo. There were a few poems that I really liked, and then a lot of them where I was just kind of, I thought I would read it at the beginning of the month to start me off, and it really did. I finished it very quickly, like 2 days, and then bam, I started reading a whole bunch of other things.
The first book I listened to this month was I Was Born for This by Alice Oseman. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. It was okay. I think it took a long time for the story to kind of start. Basically, it follows 2 characters. One is named Angel and the other one is named Jimmy. And Angel is a fan of this band called The Ark, and Jimmy is the lead singer in the band The Ark. And through some ways they meet up, and yeah, but that kind of happens like at the midpoint.
Oh.
Yeah, so it takes a long time for the story to kind of get going, and I don't know, it was fine. It was kind of cute. I think like out of the prose books by her, this is probably my favorite one, but it's still just, it was okay. That's like how I feel about most of her prose. It's just like, it's okay. It's not really for me. I think the way that she kind of portrayed fan culture was kind of good in a way. But it was good representation though, because Angel is Muslim and Jimmy is trans and gay. And then like the rest of the characters are all kind of like different like sexualities and representations, so that was good. It didn't really make up for the, if that hadn't been present in the book, I think I would have given it a 2 star. Don't come for me.
The next book I read was Of Women in the 21st Century by Shami Chakrabarti. I actually started reading this in March, but it just took me a little bit. It's quite good. I gave it 3 stars. It's kind of an overview of the state of women in the world. It was written in 2017 though, which had a very different outlook to the world that we have now, and I think it's already somewhat dated in that respect. Like, because there was a lot of like optimism about how the world would be, and now 4 years later and we're like, oh no, it's not better. Definitely, like, if you want to read about important issues like education and violence and things like that, there's a chapter. Each chapter is about a different women's issue: wealth and health and home, security and insecurity, and then faith. So it kind of covers each thing individually. I've actually had this book since 2017. It was given to me as a gift, but that was also the year that I came out as trans. So it was kind of, it felt, even though the person who gave it to me didn't know, like a little bit like, here you go, you should reinforce who you are. So I put it off for a long time, but then I ended up reading an article by Shami Chakrabarti in The Guardian, I think. And so I thought I would give her another try, and it was worth it. I would recommend.
The next book I read was Folk med ångest, or Anxious People as it's called in English, by Fredrik Backman. This is about a failed bank robbery and a hostage situation.
Oh.
But it's kind of not really about that, but it's also about that. It's mainly about like people, the weird circumstances which the book takes place. It was really, really good. I felt very like kind of hopeful at the end of the book, even though the book is kind of sad. It deals with a lot of like mental health issues, anxiety, and all kinds of things, like depression as well. But yeah, just after I read it, I kind of just like tear-eyed. I was just like, oh, I feel really hopeful in a weird weird way. So I definitely want to read more by him. I know a man named Uwe is supposed to be quite good as well. And like his afterword was really good as well. It was just, it's really good. And the only main issue that I had, because obviously I read it in Swedish because I'm Swedish and the book came out in Swedish, is that a lot of the way that some of the characters spoke felt like it was translated from English. It was really strange. But I was like, I had to go back and be like, he wrote this in Swedish, right? And I was like, yeah, he did. So yeah, like, I don't know if it's the way that people talk where this is set that kind of just was a bit jarring, or if I've been away from Sweden for too long. But I don't know. I just was like, no one talks like in this specific way that some of the characters speak. Other than that, 4.5 out of 5 stars. That little dialogue thing kind of took it down just a little bit, but overall, like, recommend, really, really good. And I think it's coming to Netflix as a TV show or movie, I don't know. Yeah, also the Swedish cover is ugly. Like,
it is.
Who would pick this up? The English cover is much nicer. I would recommend a good read if you need a little sharing up, even though it has some difficult topics.
The next book I read was Riding the Camp by Yusuf Kasmir. I think I mentioned this in the last wrap-up. I got it last month. Written by a Palestinian refugee in Lebanon who then moved to the UK later. But he writes with really beautiful language. Just a lot of translation that I've seen from Arabic sounds beautiful, and I don't know if it's the translator or if it's just how Arabic is, but every time I've read something from someone who either has written in Arabic or whose first language is Arabic, it always is so beautifully lyrical, and this is definitely also beautifully lyrical. And also, it's a perspective that you don't get that often, that of a refugee living in like a refugee camp. It touches on a lot of quite sad topics, obviously, because it's talking about the experiences there, but would definitely recommend it to anyone who wants to know more. So this was a recommendation from the Poetry Book Society, so you know that it's at least a little bit good. Definitely. It was more than a little bit good. It was very good.
The next book I finished, which I started in March, I think. No, February? Anyway, it took me a hell of a long time to finish Crescent City, A House of Blood and something. It's a long title, okay? It is by Sarah J. Maas. And as you know, I've read, obviously, A Court of Thorns and Roses and really liked, and then on someone's recommendation, I borrowed this from the library and listened to it, and it is a very long audiobook. The book itself, I think, is 800 pages. And it basically follows a character named Bryce, who's like best friend and her pack of wolves.
Actually, literal wolves?
No, they shapeshift.
Okay.
Yeah, they are like slaughtered, and she is kind of like there when it kind of happens, and then like 2 years later, this guy named I can't remember. Anyway, he's like a fallen angel. This is a paranormal book, if you couldn't tell. He is like, oh, I'm gonna solve what happened because there's like other murders that are happening that are similar to what happens 2 years ago, and then he gets Bryce to help him kind of solve them, or they're like forced together to work on this case, and then obviously a lot of stuff happens, and I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars. It was just too long. Like, I think so much could have been shredded and like shortened and stuff. Like, obviously the pace was kind of like, it kept going, but like the last part of the book, it was just, everything kind of happened so much, and I was like, I felt like a lot of this could have been shifted around, shortened, edited. It was just too long, and the romance between Bryce and the angel guy, it just took too long. Obviously it's like an enemies to lovers kind of situation, but it was just like, it was a bit too slow going for me to be like, okay, the case bit is keeping this pace, but not too much. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend reading this. I mean, I kind of feel like if you're a Sarah J. Maas fan and you read like everything else by her, like, why wouldn't you read this one? I haven't read Throne of Glass, for instance, and I don't want to read that series either. Nah, I'm not gonna read the second book, I don't think.
I must say, and I love mysteries. When mysteries happen in the past, and then people come and they're like, what were you doing on this day? I don't even remember what I was doing a week ago. How are you meant to,
Recall.
2 years ago,
Yeah.
what was I doing on the 15th of March? I have no clue at all. And that is always something that bothers me in any media where they're like,
and they can
10
recall
years ago,
it so
what were
well.
you doing? Like, I don't know. 10 years ago, I was a child.
Yeah. Or when they can, like, in detail describe someone. Like, I don't remember how people look that I see in the street.
No, I don't really. People's faces are gone.
Random people, like some suspect, I would be like, I don't know, it was just some guy.
Yeah, also, like, people's complexions, I don't get that. Fair, sallow, dark, ruddy. Like, these are all, they mean nothing to me. What does that mean? What?
No.
I could not describe a person in words that other people would understand. The next book I read was Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I really enjoyed this. 5 out of 5 stars. You said that you would lend it to me ages ago, and then our book group at work is going to be discussing it at some point in the future. So I thought I would read it and get it out of the way, and I read it in 2 days. Probably could have read it in 1 if I hadn't had to work. I really enjoyed it. I liked the atmosphere. I really liked the main character, and the way, just the descriptions of everything were just brought you into the world so well. I don't want to spoil anything because, like,
part of it is going in not really knowing.
Yeah, you don't know anything and you learn it along the way, and I think that's it's really well done in this book. You don't feel like, what is happening? You're kind of like, oh, what's happening? This is all very mysterious in a good way. Whereas, you know, sometimes other books, they're like, I'm trying to be mysterious, but actually I'm just confusing you.
Yeah. This
book does not do that. You're engaged the whole way through, and then you get to the end and you're like, like, how can this be the end? I want more. Yeah. So definitely would recommend this.
And she's on the short list of the Women's Prize in Fiction, which I think is
well deserved.
Yeah. If she wins, I'll be like, yeah. The next book I read is The Beautiful by Renee Audie. This takes place in 1800s New Orleans. So basically the main character arrives there in the beginning of the book, and because she's like running away from Paris from mysterious circumstances and then she arrives in New Orleans, and then she's kind of brought into this world kind of by accident, where there's like supernatural beings kind of, and there's like murders happening. If I compare this to Crescent City, this is way much better. It's kind of slow going, there's like not super much happening, but it was just like a nice atmospheric book. I really enjoyed it. I definitely want to read the second book. But yeah, it kind of had like a really romantic little thread as well that I really like, although it was a bit like insta-lovey to a point, but I was still like, you know what, I don't really mind. I don't know, I just really like the atmosphere overall. Would recommend. I think I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I think the insta-love was a little bit too fast, dragged it down a little bit, but overall enjoyed it. Want to read the second book.
The next 2 books that I read were Check Please Book 1 and 2. So if you don't know Check Please, you should go look it up, because it's amazing. It's about...
And for free online.
And you can read it for free online.
And not by downloading it illegally. Yeah. It's actually available. Literally,
the author, Ngozi Ukazu, has made it available online for you for free. We just happen to have, well, you own the physical copies. I thought, I've read them before, but I thought it would kind of be interesting to see what they were like. It's a comic, so, you know, beautifully, beautifully drawn. And the characters are all wonderful, and I love all of them deeply. It's about Biddy, who is a hockey player.
Well, he's a figure skater who ends up in a...
He's a figure skater who ends up on a Division I hockey team at university, and is kind of hidden through his 4 years at university in the US. He grows to accept himself and love himself, and it's just a cute adorable story with men who are not toxic masculinity avatars.
Yeah.
So I definitely would recommend it. 5 out of 5 stars every single time I read it. I read it like 5 or 6 times by now. You should read them.
There's also a Kickstarter going on
Yes.
until the end of May. If you want to get them in a different formats.
Mm-hmm.
So I read this one, which is The Lives of Saints by Bardugo. I can show the actual cover. This is the Illumina Crate special edition. So yeah, this is what it looks like. Also featured in the TV show. Shadow and Bone.
TV show Shadow and Bone.
Yes. So this is like an inverse book kind of, where it's like about saints that kind of existed in their world. And it was quite interesting. It's kind of like a somewhere between a like children's book and like book that you would read maybe as like, oh, this is the actual stories of the saints.
Like a reference.
Yeah. They're very short kind of stories about like how each saint became a saint, or like how someone has interacted with like the saint. But yeah, it was quite good. I think I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I mean, if you like the world, then maybe you should read this. Otherwise, I don't think it's like...
Probably won't give you that much
yeah.
if you're not already immersed in some way.
I really enjoyed, obviously, the art is beautiful. And then, like, I feel like the way, just how expansive the world is in a way was really interesting. Like, how she just have come up with all these stories of these saints. Mind blown. I had a Bardugo little binge in the middle of this month, obviously, because of the show coming out. So I wanted to read everything.
The next book I read was The Stone Age by Jen Hadfield. I think I thought this book was different from what it actually is. I mean, I didn't know anything about Jen Hadfield, but the way that she writes, I would have thought that she was in her late 20s or early 30s. She's not. She's older than that. And I think it was good. I quite liked it. It just wasn't quite what I was expecting from it. It talks about how when you're neurodivergent, your experience of the world is different from a lot of people, and the confusion that you have when people talk to you or are talking about things as if everyone understands them and you don't because you're neurodivergent, which I thought was quite interesting and good. And the language is quite lyrical, quite nice. There were a few of the poems that I really liked that I was like, oh wow, I can relate to this, or I really understand it. And then most of the poems I was kind of meh about.
The next book, also Bardugo, The Language of Thorns. This is like more like a storytelling book in the universe of the Grisha. And this was really good as well. So all the stories are kind of broken up by the different countries that are in the Grisha verse. They were all really good.
So they're like fairy tales from each country? Okay.
Kind of. So there's like 1 or 2 for each country. Some of the stories are referenced in the books as well, which is kind of interesting. Same with the saints. So that kind of gave it a little bit of like, ooh, I know about this. How did she come up with all this? I don't know. I feel like, yeah, especially the last one was really good. It's like a kind of Little Mermaid / Ursula origin story, kind of, but not really. They were really quick to get through because it's like a lot of art as well. And the art kind of grows as the story progresses as well, which I was like, ooh. You don't have to read this if you haven't read the Grisha books. I don't think this kind of style alone. So if you're interested in like different kind of fairy tales, would recommend. And if you're a fan of the Grisha, would recommend.
The next book I read was The Tweets of OMG Check Please, which is just the collection of the actual physical tweets that were made to accompany Check Please. I think because Ngozi, she started out actually doing the comics in real time, so she was tweeting at the same time and you could read the comic. And then I think because making a comic book is so difficult and takes a lot of time, she ended up having to put the Twitter on private, I think.
Yeah.
It's open again now, but it meant that you couldn't read them in sequence. And now you can read this. It has every single tweet plus some art, which is really cool, which you don't see if you're just reading the webcomic or the comic in the book. I quite liked it. It was really cute. I mean, because I already know the story, and it's just kind of, if you really like the comic, then this will add to your enjoyment, but it's not a book to read by itself because you probably wouldn't get anything out of it if you didn't know anything that was happening. If you Google Check Please, you may be able to find it. Or you can join the Kickstarter.
Or just read the tweets on the Twitter page.
Yes. Well, I don't think, because it's just bound beautifully as well.
Yeah. To conclude my Lee Bardugo Grishaverse binge this month, I read Rule of Wolves, which is the second book in the King of Scars duology. This was much better than King of Scars. I did not like King of Scars that much, mainly because there was a lot of things that happened that I was like, what's going on? Don't understand. And then this one didn't really have that. It has some nice little cameos for some certain people that I enjoyed. I didn't necessarily like the ending that much, mainly because I don't like the ship or the couple in this book. Other than that, it was pretty good. It was nice to be back in the world. Nikolaj is my favorite character. But this duology, you kind of have to have read the Grisha trilogy. Not necessarily Six of Crows, but you definitely the Grisha, because there's characters in this that otherwise won't make any sense, I think. And a lot of their kind of relationships to each other would be like, whomst. So this is more for like stans than anything else.
The cover is beautiful.
Yeah. This is the Illumicrate special edition. So the original is like red and white, and they're kind of like inverted, and then it has a nice little spine. And then the show came out, and I read everything Grisha related.
The next book I read was Le Triangle d'Or by Maurice Leblanc, which is another one of the Arsène Lupin books, and this one was not good. I gave it 1 star. This month I had 5-star books, and my very first 1-star book is racist, and the story doesn't make any sense. I mean, the racist bit is the worst bit, but if you leave that aside for a second, the story just doesn't even make sense. There's no redeeming qualities to this. Arsène Lupin is not even, like, the main character of this book. He's just a deus ex machina. I'm gonna tell you the story because it makes no sense. There's this woman who's gonna be abducted, and this man who is in love with her stops it, tries to get her to marry him, but turns out she's already married to a guy that she hates, who murders the people who were gonna kidnap her, but then gets murdered in turn. But they're somehow being pursued, this couple, who actually fall in love at the end of the book, or like they're in love by the end of the book. And turns out that their whole lives, someone has been watching both of them and trying to push them together, this couple. Which makes no sense. But and the whole book you're just like, why? What is happening? So then someone tries to murder them, and Arsène Lupin saves their life. Then it turns out that her husband, who they thought had been murdered, was actually not murdered, and he's been running the show the whole time, trying to kill them. And there's also like millions of francs worth of gold. They're trying to find this gold, but like there's this guy who's trying to kill them, and then at the end it turns out that their parents, the parents of the couple, the mom of the woman and the dad of the man, were in love. They're not related, but you do think that for like a chapter of the book. You're like, oh no, they're actually related. They're not. But they fell in love, and so they wanted their children to fall in love so that their families could be united. And they were, it makes no sense. Plus there's like backdrop of like, they're super racist and awful. Like, there's a character who's Senegalese, and he can't talk, and everyone is so rude to him and racist and just awful the whole way through to him. And then, like, so her husband is from the Middle East. Is he Turkish? Is he Greek? Is he Egyptian? I think all 3 of those are mentioned at some point or another, which obviously makes no sense. But yeah, and it's implied that he is the way he is because he's Middle Eastern and not because he's just an awful person. Anyway, not a good book, would not recommend it, don't read it. It took me the whole month to read this book because I had to like take a pause every like page or so to just breathe through the anger. and the confusion of what was happening in this book.
No.
It's so messy.
The next book I listened to was Cast by Isabel Wilkinson, and this is like a non-fiction book about the caste systems. It mainly focuses on like the US, but she also brings up like India and Nazi Germany as like kind of reference points, and basically talks about how the US is living in a caste system and how that's a good way to kind of look at the country and why it operates the way it does, obviously all the way from slavery up until present day. It's really good. Recommend. 5 out of 5 stars. I think if you are interested in like why, especially the US, is the way it is, then it's a really good book to listen to or read. It kind of like puts like,
perspective.
Yeah. And kind of just like makes you understand the world a little bit better. And I really want to read her other book, which is about the Great Migration.
The next book I read was Ill Fares the Land by Tony Judd. This was recommended to me by my dad, who thought I would really enjoy it, and he really enjoyed it. And it's kind of about how economic policy from governments has changed the way that the world is and how we can make it better if we change the way that we do things. Mm-hmm. The problem is that I don't think Tony Judd understands the politics of what happened after World War II. It's meant to be like a politics book rather than an economics book. But he describes things like the civil rights movement and third wave feminism and LGBT rights movements kind of like selfish concerns as opposed to the collective concerns of the labor unions, which I don't think is accurate. I just don't think that people trying to make racism stop be a thing is like a selfish motivation. Same with like feminism. I don't know. I mean, because it feels like when he talks about society or he talks about the community, he's talking about straight white men. And then anyone who isn't a straight white man is selfish because they're trying to improve their own lot rather than the collective lot of everyone, i.e. the straight white man. So that really angered me. The first half of the book, I was kind of like, you got me there. And then the second half where he was talking about like how like black people wanting to study African American studies or Jewish people studying Jewish studies was on par with white rich people creating gated communities. And that's where he really lost me. I was like, what? Yeah, so he was equating people who were persecuted wanting to create a space where they could study themselves or study their history and help each other to rich white people not wanting to live next to poor other people. Yeah, so it kind of ruined the book for me. I gave it 2 stars. He talks a lot about how governments should do more to help people, and I think that bit was good, but yeah, like I think he thinks that he's kind of on the left, but he's actually a centrist.
Classic.
So he had good ideas, but then he'd say things like, why should I expect someone that I don't know to help me? I can't remember exactly how he phrased it, but I was like, I wouldn't possibly expect this to happen, and my response was, why not? Why wouldn't you expect that? Would we expect a resident of Omaha, Nebraska to enjoy paying taxes for the provision of bridges and highways in Kuala Lumpur on the implied understanding that his Malaysian equivalent will be voluntarily doing likewise for him? No. My response is, why not? If we build a world in which we're able to do, like, why not expect reciprocity? Or encourage reciprocity? Or literally, what is the reason why you would not expect that? Because you wouldn't do it for them, is what you're saying. So you're selfish rather than all of these other... Anyway, when I told my dad that I did not like this book, he was super surprised. He was just like, what? I didn't read that at all. I didn't, like, get any of that. And, you know, maybe he just wasn't thinking about it.
The next book I listened to was Atomic Habits by James Clear. I gave this a 4 to 5 stars. It's a very quick read. Audiobook's like 5 hours, I think, or something like that. It's basically about how to make habits more easy or like how to break them down, and it was really good. I think some of the examples, like why you should do it, is like you want to lose weight, you want to become more rich, or you want to be, you know, whatever. I was like, ugh, that's such lazy like examples, but like I get it, to like just cut across like what he wanted to say. The examples of doing habits and creating good habits was really good. And a lot of the ways to do it are free on his website as well, like atomichabits.com, I think, because it's mentioned like 5 million times in the book. This was really good. If you want to like, if you have like habits you want to start or bad habits you want to kind of break out of, it's a really good book to read and kind of get like inspired by, and how to like actually go about creating new habits. Because sometimes I feel like a lot of these books, they kind of brush over that part to some extent, or it's like an expensive way to go about creating new habits. But this was like, you create like a stacking effect where it's like, if you do this one thing, then immediately when you do it, you put this other habit on top of it, and like start small, like you build your way up, which I thought was like a much better way to go about it, rather than like, you need to change your life from day one. Building habits is how you, in the long run, create like a better life for yourself. It can just literally be about like wanting to learn to play an instrument, or you want to write a book, or whatever.
The last book I read was Bedouin of the London Evening by Rosemary Tonks. I was really drawn in by the whole, I don't know, the cover, the name of the author, the name of the book, the picture. I don't know. I saw this, I think, in a bargain bin at Foyle's. I was like, I'll pay £1 for that book. And I did. Didn't really live up to the hype. So there's like a mystery as well with Rosemary Tonks, because she disappeared in the 70s for several years, and like no one knew what happened to her. And then when she came back, she was like, I'm religious now and poetry is terrible.
God.
Which is, but like she basically became a hermit, and then she like tried to burn all of her books. That's like, it was kind of strange, and the introduction made it sound like kind of, ooh, what a weird, interesting thing. And then I read the poems, and I wasn't like, there's an element of Orientalism that I did not appreciate. It's kind of using the backdrop of North Africa, the Middle East, or like West Asia to spice up her boring suburban life in London, using the imagery from these countries to make her own life seem less boring, because that's what she is. She's discontented with her life in London, basically. It didn't do it for me. I think I was kind of swept up in the excitement that everyone who was involved in this book was. She's very self-satisfied, but also hates what her life is. And she either thinks that everyone should hate their life too, or should have her life so that they can also hate it. And she's very judgmental. She has like criticism at the end. She was a literary critic for a while. Just judgmental in the way that she talks about other people. It was kind of a bummer note to end the month on, to be honest. But yeah.
I had a pretty good end of my month. I read Darius the Great Is Not Okay by Audie. This is about a half Iranian teen, and he lives in the US with his family, and then his mom, who's from Iran, is like, we're gonna go there because your grandfather has a brain tumor and he's gonna die soon, so we should see him before he passes away. And he's never been there before, doesn't feel like he kind of belongs because he doesn't understand the language that well. And then he meets a friend there, or like he becomes friends with like a guy who's the same age as him. It was like a really sweet little book. I cried reading it because it was pretty sweet, and like, because the main character's relationship with his dad is not very good. They both suffer from like clinical depression. He doesn't really know how to talk about it, and he thinks his dad doesn't really like him. Father-son relationships. What a sweet spot. It was very sweet and very lovely, and like I googled places that they went to, and I was like, ooh, this looks cool, what's this? So it was a nice little read. Would recommend if you want to read like a contemporary young adult book, and it's obviously about like mental health, so have that in mind. Would recommend. I'm going to read the second book probably this month or next month. I don't know if I should mention my DNF book.
Yeah, mention it.
Okay. So I started reading this because this is like the Illumicrate book of March. So they had like a read along this month. And I stopped reading after 25 pages because I did not enjoy it at all. I don't know why. I thought this was gonna be up my alley because it's basically about like, I don't know, war and like rebellion and like sapphic. But I don't know. I think it was the way that it was written. It just didn't vibe at all with me. But I've seen like people seem to be enjoying it, so it was just me, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always sad when the book doesn't vibe. Obviously, we hauled some books. Well, I hauled.
I hauled books too.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
One of the books I hauled this month was A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. This is the first book in a series about Hades and Persephone, like a retelling. It's kind of like, I guess, romantic and stuff, which I obviously like. Cover is pretty, so why not? I'm probably going to read this soonish, I think.
I got 2 books from the same place, but I got Gender, A Graphic Guide by Meg John Barker and Jules Scheel. I got both of these from The Second Shelf, which is a London-based feminist secondhand bookshop. And I basically opened their website and these 2 books were on the front page as like featured that we just received, and I was like, wait a minute, I need those. So this is kind of text and graphic, talking about the evolution of how we think about gender, and also just like maybe you should think about your own gender. I think I haven't read it yet, so but it looked very cool. And they've done Feminism, A Graphic Guide, and Queer, A Graphic History. I've heard good things about those, so I think because I think about gender every day, I thought it would be kind of cool to have this. Similarly, this is a book that I really wanted to get last year when it came out, and then I just kind of didn't end up there. But this is Magnolia by Nina Mingya Pauls. It was also a Poetry Book Society recommendation, and it's about Nina's mixed race childhood, basically. And I will probably read it this month, since May is API History Month.
The next book I got was A Lair of Dreams by Libba Bray. I have read all the books in the Binding series. This is the 3rd book? No, the 2nd. I listened to them on audiobook. Love them. The audiobook is the best audiobook I've ever listened to. So I obviously wanted to get like physical copies. The way that it's been published is very messy. So this I think is the US edition, and then I think 2 of the copies I have are the UK, so they're slightly smaller. So I decided to just order this because I was like, I have literally all the other books in the series, so maybe I should just get the 2nd book.
The next book I got, which I will not be reading cover to cover, is A Partridge in a Pear Tree by Carrie Lord, which is crochet instructions for how to make birds. I think it's like the 12 birds of Christmas, so like the 12 days of Christmas, except they're all birds. So the first one is a partridge, but then and like turtle doves, French hens, calling birds, and then the ones that are not actually birds, they've chosen a bird to represent whatever it is. I am not very good at piecing together things, so this is going to be a huge challenge for me, but they were so cute that I thought I should get them and try them out.
The next book I got was She's Too Pretty to Burn by Wendy Hurd. This is a contemporary thriller, I think, kind of. It's sapphic. The feel is a little like dark academia kind of thing, but like in the art world. There's like murders happening and artists and stuff, and the cover is
It's beautiful.
gorgeous. One of the reasons why I got this, obviously. Kind of summery, so I feel like maybe June, July, August will be a good time to read this. Very excited. 2 Girls, 1 Fire, A Chance to Be Remembered.
The next books I also got all together. I went to Gaze the Word. So I got the Penguin Book of Homosexual Verse, just because I thought it sounded interesting.
Yeah.
And then I got The Colors of Love, which was more of an impulse buy, because I've never heard of Leon da Cervo. I'm not sure I'll like this, but I just thought I'll get it, and then if I don't like it, I can just...
It looks very 80s.
Yes, it looks dated, basically, but I thought it'd be kind of an interesting thing to read. Memories of Young Love, Memories of Life Lived. And then I got Queer Noises by Gill, which is about LGBT plus people in the music industry and how they shaped how music happened, exploring gender non-conforming people, gay men, lesbian women, bisexual people, talking about what they've done.
Next book I got was In Deep Waters by F.T. Lukens. This is one of my most anticipated books of the year. I haven't read it yet, but I really want to. It's about a prince who is gonna go on his coming of age tour, and he's on a ship and mysterious fantasy stuff happens. It's gay and has a very cute cover. Again, this also feels a bit summery, so I might wait until June to read this.
The next book I got from like an occult bookshop in London, Atlantis. It's near the British Museum, and every time I walk past the British Museum, I think I should go there, and then I can't find it. But I did manage to find it this time, and I got this. It's called Gods and Graven Images, The Chalk Hill Figures of Britain by Paul Newman. It's about the chalk figures that are all over this island. Some of them are really, really cool. Basically what happens is that these hills are chalk deposits, and in the past people scraped the grass and rock away so that you could see the white bit. And it's kind of talking about why they did it, what they were like. This is my favorite one. I'm just gonna hide a bit. YouTube won't like. But I've seen him in person, and he is massive. He takes up an entire hill, a whole hill just for this man. There was a lot of controversy because of the way that erosion works. You have to re-scrape the hill, and there were people who were opposed to re-scraping certain bits of him. Science prevailed, and they followed what had already previously been there. I would recommend that you Google them though, because they're very cool. And if you happen to be about in Britain, would recommend seeing them. They're awe-inspiring. They're massive. Kind of like the Nazca lines in Peru, here in our own backyard.
The next two books I got was Jade War and Jade City. This is the first one. By Fonda Lee. This is in the Green Bone Saga. Love when they write the name of the series on the side. As far as I know, it's fantasy. It follows a family. In this world, jade is like a very important material. It makes, like, I think people stronger who have like magical abilities, or you can harness their...
That's in real life too.
I think it's kind of epic, and it follows the family. I think the third one comes out in December. So I've heard pretty good things about this, so I wanted to get like hardcover copies. It looks very cool. I'm very excited.
My final book is the collected poems of Allen Ginsburg. I don't really know that much about him. I know he was gay, I think, or at least that's what Wikipedia was telling me. But this painting made me think of an actor. You can see an actual photo of Allen Ginsburg here. I got this from our local charity shop, and I thought, why not? This is a discarded library copy from the US. I don't know how it got here, but from West Springfield, Massachusetts Public Library. But anyway, now it's mine. I don't think I've ever read anything by him, but I just saw it and I was like, why shouldn't I? I think there must be a local person who's gay, because we find a lot of gay-related things in
just
the
to one
charity shop.
person.
Well, maybe they're like getting rid of a bunch of books, like slowly, a bit at a time.
Yeah.
Because there have been a bunch. There have been quite a lot. And I don't think that's representative of all London charity shops.
No. The last book I got this month was The Prism Healer by Lynette Noni. This is the Fairloot exclusive edition, so it has like sprayed edges, and then there's some art here and art here. The main character is like the healer in the prison, and then I think someone wants to get her away from there, or she is supposed to help the rebellion or something. It sounds pretty good. I mean, looking from the art, it looks like there's a romance, which is always something that I like. I don't really like books about romance. I'm boring like that. I'm just a sucker for romance. I think my mom, it's her fault. Well, a lot of the movies that I watched growing up was just like romantic comedies, so it ruined me, I guess. I also actually got all the hardcover copies of the Sarah J. Maas books, the Akhtar.
That is all of our April, which I think it was a pretty good month. We got a lot of stuff. We read a lot. We bought a lot. which is a plus or a minus depending on how you
Capitalism.
feel. Yeah.
Tell us what you read this month,
Yes.
or are you excited for the books that we have hauled? You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Goodreads, where we are Tessnorland. Comment, like, subscribe.
Thank you for watching.
Hej då!
Bye.
Ooh.
What a mysterious
That's like
byline.
Eurovision, not joking.